Habakkuk is a prophet who is a contemporary of Jeremiah. So Habakkuk is also living towards the end of the 7th century into the 6th century. And he has a little bit different outlook on what's happening that we just talked about with the book of Jeremiah. So again, King Josiah began his reign in 622. He gets killed in 609. Jehoiakim becomes the king after Josiah's death, and we know that the Babylonians are rising up. They've already invaded Jerusalem. They are taking their time in terms of destroying Jerusalem. So Habakkuk is addressing the same situation that Jeremiah is addressing, but he does it a little bit differently. So Habakkuk questions God. One of the things I love about the prophets is that they aren't afraid to question God. Sometimes they do it in anger, sometimes they do it in sadness or questioning, but they're not afraid to really say what it is that's on their mind. And so here in chapter 1, we have a dialogue between Habakkuk and God. And Habakkuk cries out to God, "O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not listen, or cry to you violence, and you will not save? Why do you make me see wrongdoing and look at trouble? Destruction and violence are before me, strife and contention arise, so the law becomes slack and justice never prevails. The wicked surround the righteous, therefore judgment comes forth perverted." Habakkuk is questioning God's presence. He knows that there's going to be punishment, but he's just asking God, why is this taking so long? Why is there no justice for the people of Israel? Well, God answers back. "A work is being done in your days that you would not believe if you were told. For I am arousing the Chaldeans, that fierce and impetuous nation who march through the breadth of the earth to seize dwellings not their own." God is raising up the Chaldeans, the Babylonians. God is doing something that Habakkuk cannot possibly understand. And this is a way for God to say, look, I'm doing something, you don't know what I'm doing, and it doesn't really concern you anyway. And then Habakkuk questions God's intentions again. "Are you not from of old, O Lord, my God, my Holy One? You shall not die. O Lord, you have marked them for judgment, and you, O Rock, have established them for punishment. Your eyes are too pure to behold evil, and you cannot look on wrongdoing. Why do you look on the treacherous and are silent when the wicked swallow those more righteous than they?" So Habakkuk tries a little bit different approach here at the end of chapter 1. He compliments God. He says, you're too holy. You're a rock. You're the Holy One of Israel. Why are you doing this? How can you do this when you're so holy and good? And then God has these woes on the people. This is all in chapter 2. Habakkuk basically says at the beginning of chapter 2, I'm a sentinel now. I'm a guard. I'm going to stand watch, and I'm going to see what God is going to say to me, and I'm going to see if God answers my complaint. Well, in more recent versions, English versions of the Bible, the word is alas, but it more translates into the word woe. Woe are these people. These people are going to be in trouble. And we see different kinds of people that are addressed in this section. Alas for you who heap up what is not your own. Those people who try to steal from other people. Alas for you who get evil gain for your house. Alas for you who build a town by bloodshed. Alas for you who make neighbors drink, pouring out your wrath until they are drunk. Alas for you who say to the wood, wake up, to silent stone, rouse yourself. So people who are humiliating other people, people who are trying to gain for themselves at the expense of others, people who are creditors who are trying to take too much money from other people, people who are worshiping other idols. These are the people that God has targeted in the book of Habakkuk. And so Habakkuk is not really questioning the punishment exactly, and not really punishing the people that God is punishing, but Habakkuk is questioning God's justice, particularly the length of God's justice. How long is this going to take? How much are we going to have to endure before you can relent? What's going on? Well, in the end, Habakkuk finally kind of understands that God's got it all taken care of, and Habakkuk needs to just kind of sit down and sit back and understand that Habakkuk really doesn't have a part in it. And so the third chapter, the last chapter of the book of Habakkuk, is a prayer that Habakkuk speaks. A prayer of the prophet Habakkuk. O Lord, I have heard of your renown, and I stand in awe, O Lord, of your work. In our own time revive it. In our own time make it known. In wrath may you remember mercy. And so this is a praise of thanksgiving, a psalm of thanksgiving, basically, that God has done something wonderful in the earth. And God is going to trample the nations with his fury, but God is going to save Israel. And essentially this ending to the book of Habakkuk is a lot like the ending to the book of Job. That Habakkuk realizes that God has everything under control. And Habakkuk's good with that. Habakkuk is going to kind of settle down and wait now. And he says in verse 16, I hear and I tremble within. My lips quiver at the sound. Rottenness enters into my bones, and my steps tremble beneath me. I wait quietly for the day of calamity to come upon the people who attack us. I will rejoice in the Lord. I will exult in the God of my salvation. God, the Lord, is my strength. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer and makes me tread upon the heights. So now Habakkuk is humbled. He's waiting patiently and no longer questioning God's motives. The book of Habakkuk brings up this issue of theodicy. And theodicy is phrased a lot in different ways, but essentially it's the problem of evil. It's the biggest question in theology. If we believe in a good, benevolent God, then how do we reconcile a good, benevolent God who has power, who's all-powerful, with the presence of evil in the world? Why is there evil in the world? Why do bad things happen to good people? Why does an essentially good God allow bad things to happen? These are all the questions of theodicy. And this is essentially Habakkuk's question. Why are you continuing to punish the people of Israel? Why do you continue to allow these nations to trample all over Israel? If you're good. And so we have to understand that eventually Habakkuk's answer comes in, we need trust. We can question God, but we also have to trust God, that God has everything under control. And that's the same answer that we get in the book of Job, which is also a book about theodicy. Now I want to move on to the book of Haggai, and we're going to go through this book really pretty quickly. Haggai is a short little book. Haggai comes right after the exile. So at the end of the book of Habakkuk, at the end of the book of Jeremiah, the people of Israel have been taken into exile in Babylon. And they remain there for about 50 to 70 years, kind of depending on which account you're reading. Well, then they come back to Jerusalem. Not all of them. Most of them come back to Jerusalem. They see the city in shambles. There's no temple anymore, so they decide they're going to rebuild the temple. Well, they run into some trouble. And so eventually then they quit. They quit trying to build the temple. Well, then Haggai comes along. And Haggai only preaches for about 3 months. That's the extent of his prophecy. He comes along about 18 years after the Israelites have returned to Jerusalem. The Babylonians have been defeated, so we're now in the Persian period, and King Darius is the king of Persia. We no longer have a king in Israel. Remember, the monarchy was destroyed when the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem. So now, instead of having a king, we have a governor and we have a high priest. And Joshua is the high priest, Zerubbabel is the governor, and essentially what we see in Haggai, which is also a really short book, is that Haggai preaches 4 different messages. And in these 4 messages, he is encouraging the people of Israel to build a temple, to rebuild the temple. That's all this is about. And he uses different kinds of arguments to get this point across. And so the first one is that the time has come. There's going to be no satisfaction. So he talks about you've sown much and harvested little. You eat, but you don't have enough. You drink, but you never have your fill. You clothe yourselves, but no one is warm. You that earn wages, put them in a bag with holes. And so there's going to be no satisfaction. There's no ability to just be content anymore with in Jerusalem if they don't build this temple. Then he tells them to look at the temple. Those people who can remember what the temple looked like before, now they look at it and all they see is a pile of rocks. And so what Haggai is saying here is that the people have to take courage. They have to be able to rebuild this temple. God says, I am with you, according to the promise I made when you came out of Egypt. For thus says the Lord of hosts, once again in a little while I will shake the heavens and the earth and the sea and all the nations. The silver is mine, the gold is mine, the latter splendor of this house shall be greater than the former. So this temple is going to be even greater than the one before. In the third speech, he compares the temple, the destroyed temple, like to a dead body. And he basically says that now the people have come back from Babylon. They're straightening their lives out. They're straightening their faith out. And this temple just sits in the midst of them like a dead body. It contaminates everything. And so they have to rebuild the temple in order to purify their faith, in order to purify themselves. And so he basically says, like that old movie, he says, if you build it, I will come. If you build this temple, God's presence will be in it, and it will be better than the other temple before that. Then the final speech in the end of chapter 2 is that God will overthrow the kingdoms and the nations. And here's Haggai's little message against these other nations. God will shake their kingdoms. God will overthrow the thrones of the other nations. And Zerubbabel, my servant, I will make you like a signet ring, for I have chosen you. Zerubbabel will be the symbol of God's presence in the city. And so eventually the language of Haggai is that the city of Jerusalem will be restored. God will be there. And this is a fairly typical kind of post-exile message. That these people who have returned to Jerusalem will now be the holy ones and will be different than the people who lived there before.